afternoon to NRI Stream's live viewers. A happy 244th Independence Day to the United States of America. And also today is Guru Purnami. So happy Guru Purnami too. Today we have a special guest. He is not a regular or regional politician. He is articulate, well-rounded, and highly successful businessman. His words carry weight. His message resonates locally, nationally, and globally. We NRIs look up to him fondly, and we have high hopes on him. He is a Telugu Desam Party MP and a member of 16th and 17th Lok Sabha of India, representing Guntur constituency. He is an industrialist, politician, and the managing director of Amar Raja Groups of Industries. He has spoken a number of different issues of public interest in the Parliament of India. His description and analysis on the subject of tolerance in India was appreciated by the general public. Please welcome Mr. Jaydev Galla. Thank you for joining our show, Mr. Galla. Thank you for your time, sir.
Good evening, or good morning, I should say, to all of you.
It's good evening, sir, but everybody is watching all over the world. So it's good afternoon, good evening, and of course, it's a good morning too.
Yes.
You have a lot of viewers watching and you are our favorite leader.
Thank you. It's nice to be able to interact with all of you on the 4th of July.
Thank you. What an auspicious day to talk to you. It can't be better than this. Today is Guru Purnami too.
Yes. Good me to all of you as well. I spent a lot of the 4th of July when I was growing up in Chicago.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. We are going to go listen a lot of things from you, and we are waiting for that. And before that, viewers, today we are going to discuss only current global and national based topics only. Please hold on to your party based questions or issues. Hope you understand. We have a few of our experts team in our panel who are going to ask questions based on each topic. So let me introduce our team. Mr. Ram Mohan Konda, founder of CATS, that is Capital Area Telugu Society, and also Commissioner on Maryland Government Commission on South Asia Affairs. Please welcome.
Thank you, Sri. Thank you. Jaydev Galla on the show.
And now we have Bedluri, Board of Director at Greater Washington Telugu Cultural Sangam, GWTCS, and Chairperson of TANA.
Hello, Jay Garu. Thanks, Shri, for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us, Yash. And we have Mr. Sridhar Apasani, Chairman of North America Telugu Society, that is NATS.
Hello, good evening, Jaydev Garu, and thanks for having me in this program today. Thank you. I'm glad to join here.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining in. And we have Mr. Vishal Aditya Putluri, graduate from Harvard University with master's degree in international development and economics.
Hi, Sri. Thanks a lot for having me.
Thank you for joining, Vishal. And now we have a young entrepreneur, Monica Uyuru. She's an aspirant entrepreneur pursuing business and IT graduation in Berkeley University.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you. And I want to join Mr. Ram Mohan Konda to start your questions.
Thank you, Sri, and thank you, first of all, NRI Streams for connecting the leaders who have gone to India, successful businessman in India. It's very good opportunity for all our Indian community to listen, learn, and maybe to do some back home business with Jaydev Galla, who is a very successful person. Sri, I'm based in Maryland, state of Maryland. I moved here like 26 years back to United States. Right now, I'm a commissioner on Maryland South Asian American affairs. I'm not representing as a commissioner right now, so I'm just representing as a individual community person. So my role here in this Maryland is, we kind of engage South Asian communities through the governor's ethnic and cultural commissions to deliver the voices of South Asian Marylanders to the government administration, connect the administration with citizens, and alert the administration about real-time needs of South Asians, including most of them are Indian communities in Maryland. So these kind of a things, kind of a conducting sessions related to business opportunity in the state, related to business, including basic things like how to write a contract, what are the programs state has, regarding the house, if there is any below poverty line in the community. There are a lot of Bangladeshis, Nepalis, they come on visitor visa, so we kind of help them and make them aware of the government programs, utilize the facilities in the state of Maryland. That's what our commissioner role as we play. So it's kind of it's helping the community where we live in. That's my kind of a approach. I kind of involved. So before that, I kind of involved many non-profit organizations in the U.S. national organization and states, and also some Asian association. So I don't have anything to say more about this MP, Member of Parliament Jaydev Garu. So rather, I kind of need to know more about from your side on current situation. Maybe most of the viewers want to know what's happening in India. Since you are a member of Parliament, more vocal. I have seen your debate, in Parliament. So the first question I have is, if it is okay, Srigar, I can go and talk to, or Mr. Jaydev wanted to say something before going there.
Go ahead.
Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. See, sir, first question I have is, when the government started in 2014, we kind of started as a Make in India program. So my question to you is, since we have a lot of, I may be wrong, but, that's for our assumption, kind of a red tapeism, infrastructure issues, land reforms. How far the Indian government is successful in that area? See, did we get any, Make in India program is working? Is it entrepreneurs coming outside? Foreign investors have problems? Foreign FDI has any issues? That's number one. So I can go on and put all these questions, or one after the other. Sri, can you guide this?
One after another. Let Mr. Malla can answer that, and then we'll move on to the next question. Thank you.
So can everyone see me?
No, sir.
We can see you.
Okay. Right. So thank you for that question. I think, the Make in India program, when it was announced, was a very exciting program. Being from a manufacturing industry myself also, I was quite excited by the promise of what the whole program was meant to be. But then finally, if we look, 5 years down the line, how much has it accomplished? I think there has been some definite impact. You have seen many global manufacturers coming up and setting up their own 100% owned subsidiaries in India across different types of industries. But it hasn't been very successful in terms of the Indian industry becoming self-sufficient, in the sense that it's still foreign firms who are coming to make in India. It was successful from that point of view. But did it help India as a manufacturing base become globally competitive? It did not. And that's where we have lost, I think, so far. And we grew more dependent on China over the last 5 years than we were before that, not less dependent. especially in electronics and telecom and some of the other areas where our industry has not been competitive at all. And I think that was also that was a lost opportunity, because when the demand is growing at such a rapid pace in India for telecom services, whether it's telecom infrastructure or whether it's cell phones, all of that is coming from China. Even if you look at the big numbers that you've seen in the last 1 year, that so many telephones are being made in India, it's all a load of crap, because it's all the parts are coming from China and being assembled in India. And that's the best case. And in worst case, they're just changing the label after it comes to India. So, it's certainly not anything that you can call manufacturing. So I think those dependencies, I think at least now, with both the COVID scare and the supply chains being disrupted, and then the China conflict in the Himalayas, and the anti-China feeling that's coming and wanting to de-link from China is, good thought at this point. But I think even if we're committed to it, if everybody in India is committed to it, it's going to be years before we can break those links, because we'll end up damaging ourselves much more than damaging China in the process. So I think whether it's a physical war on the battlefield or an economic war, I think we have to be very careful in getting over the emotion and the rhetoric and doing something that doesn't hurt ourselves in the long run or even the short run. So I think that these are all things that need to be considered. But with this, the country needs to figure out what are the areas that it needs to be globally competent in, and create a level playing field in India for companies to be able to compete in those areas. So I think this is another opportunity now that will the government be able to match its rhetoric with the whole Atma Nirbhar something, whatever it's called, right? Are they going to be able to match the rhetoric and take those long-term steps, in electronics, in solar, renewable energy, in so many areas where we don't have the technology, we don't have the design capability, we don't have the raw materials in some case. And as entrepreneurs, we can't put the ecosystem together. That's the government that has to help to bring that ecosystem together. And then many people can come into the field following those steps.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your reply. It was wonderful. So coming to in same line, you took the China name. I think China is now kind of a new East India company, but it's not a company, but I see it's a new East India company invading kind of a different countries. China has a military power, economic power, most of the big countries have a strategic partnership, comprehensive partnership, in other words, with China, that is including us as India, Australia, New Zealand, Britain, and Canada. So now they are kind of rethinking about their partnership. Example, Britain has given a 5G setup to Hawaiian company. Even I think like India also awarded that. Britain started reviewing the thing again. Hawaii's daughter has been arrested on American warrant in Canada.
That's been banned now in India also. All Chinese make companies for telecom infrastructure has been banned for government companies, and also very strongly told to private sector also not to use Chinese make for telecom equipment now.
Oh, okay. So other ones are Australia. If you look at Australia, is a 2.5 million people. So you never see Australian Prime Minister speaking. So I'm increasing the defense budget by so much. And he's fearing some kind of a threat by South Asian Sea and all these things. So what do you think about, going forward? So globally destabilizing rise of China, how is that going to, everyone is going to act on that?
The Communist Party of China is only afraid of one thing, and that is their own people. they're not afraid of Donald Trump or anybody else in the world. So I think what they're afraid of most is internal revolt. And I don't know how, I've recently been studying a little bit about Chinese philosophy. If we believe in karma and reincarnation, they believe in what's called the mandate of heaven. And, the ruler of the country is mandated by heaven to rule. And whenever the heavens mandate becomes weak, you see things like famine and disease and war and all of these type of things become signs for the people that it's time to change the mandate. And when that happens in the past, various warlords from different regions of China would all then compete, and one of them would emerge as a revolutionary leader. So the last time that happened was with Mao becoming the first in the line of the communist dynasty. So now this empire have their ambitions have become outgrown their capabilities finally, I think, and they're finally exposing that to the world and exposing that to their own people, and they have seen this coronavirus as a sign that they're overstretching. So I think all of what they're doing, if you look at anything, from Hong Kong to Taiwan to the entire South China Sea, in the Himalayas with us, they're flexing their muscles to increase the nationalism, the feeling of nationalism in the country right now, to divert the attention to these internal problems. So I think these are acts of desperation. But if you know anything about Xi Jinping, he thinks he's definitely that emperor mandated from heaven, and his ambitions are limitless. So I think we have to really wait and see what's going to happen.
Okay, thank you, sir. Related to that, one more question, last but one. This is about everybody's wondering post-pandemic opportunities. It's a global issue. So what is that India is, for example, it's a manufacturing, job creation, whatnot. See, this is an opportunity kind of going back to the first question, Make in India. We see a lot of small industries we hear, but it may not be true, going to Vietnam and Bangladesh. US is attracting big companies, and the US is looking at India to get something done, get it from China. So that is one thing, Next thing is the job creation. So that's where we lack with lack of a quality education towards, what you need for it. You are a big industrialist, you know exactly what I'm speaking on. For example, if you look at education, India FDI doesn't allow foreign institutions, Harvard, whatever, Stanford, to allow directly without going to the bureaucracy to set up and establish an institution. Just to give an example, just to apply one application to establish a university, so it's kind of a 1 million. So that is one thing, we don't have a community colleges in days that community college is worth something like that. Can you show some light on this?
I don't think I understood your question.
Question is post-pandemic. So what is you are in a parliament, about the policies, or what is that government is taking, Atmanirbhar is one thing, but job creation process, how is that government is going to handle new manufacturing?
So are you asking about what are the prospects for job creation, or are you talking about skilling, or are you talking about education?
I'm talking about everything comprehensive, skilling, education.
So this has been the problem. I mean, it's been the problem for ages, and it continues to be a problem because our average age in India is still 25, and we have millions of people coming out of the colleges every year who need to be employed, in spite of the education levels being quite low. And as we increase our education levels, the people who will be qualified without jobs will also continue to increase unless we're creating jobs. So, job creation and having people who have the skills and knowledge to take those jobs is ultimately both our strength and our weakness, right? We have the advantage, we have the demographic advantage of having a young population. We're seeing how difficult countries in the developed world and even China with their inverted pyramid, what kind of social issues that they're going to be facing and leading to economic issues also that they're going to be facing in the future. So I think they have their own set of problems and we have the opposite set of problems where we have such a large number of young people and we're not able to gainfully employ them and keep them productive. So that is that will continue to be our challenge, and that's what we're all striving for, and every government is promising. And I think this government has promised that the economy is going to double in 5 years, and doubling. What I have to say, any government can promise doubling because it keeps happening anyway, right? As long as we keep growing at even 5-6%, we're going to double eventually. If not in 5 years, we'll definitely double in 10 years. So I think maintaining a GDP growth rate of 7 to 9% is critical if we have to eradicate poverty. This year, they're expecting that for the first time in 30 or 40 years, that poverty rate may actually increase in India. That's the kind of impact that this crisis, economic impact that this crisis is having on India. That for the first time in 40 years, the poverty rate may actually increase. So you can imagine, it's if we keep the growth rate, and that's not necessarily the best measure for how a country is developing, but it's the most reliable measure that we have today in terms of being able to actually measure something and have some trust in it, if not full trust. We at least know that plus or minus a few percentage points, it's somewhere in that region. If you look at China, when they say they're growing at 6%, they're really growing at 2%. But we know that. We can factor that, and we can still make an assessment, right? So in India, our growth rate, our size of economy is probably underestimated by about 40-50%. The growth rate is lately, I don't know how much to believe, but I can say at least plus or minus 2% is probably accurate. So you know these factors and you factor them in when making these assessments. You can still see how we're progressing. So I think you can see the historical data to see how India has been progressing. And going forward, this year, most of the latest forecasts are showing India having a degrowth of 5 to 6% over last year. So from a positive 5 or 6% growth that was originally expected in the beginning of the year, we're looking at a minus 5 to minus 6%, which means a swing of about almost 10-12%. So it's not going to be comfortable. It's going to be definitely challenging. There's industries that are doing well. There are industries that are completely wiped out. There are industries in between at all different levels of the spectrum. And in most industries that aren't completely wiped out, there's going to be winners and losers. And the winners are going to be the ones that pivot during this crisis, I think. And the losers are going to be the ones waiting for the crisis to get over.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And last and final question about this is completely to your company. So this is regarding electrical cars, Andy. How far electrical cars expensive in India laguda, since you are related to battery industry, lithium ion batteries still China nunchi import this raw material. Recently I was reading you guys Amaraja batteries have some MOU with some company to reduce the weight of the battery. I have very little knowledge about it. Just anything up on this information would be good.
Yeah, sure. If you look at the electric vehicle industry in this country, in India, it's still at a very, very early stage. There are maybe a few thousand vehicles on the road, not more than that in the entire country. Even e-bikes, still very low in numbers. E-rickshaws are doing, the unorganized sector ones are doing quite well, but the e-autos still haven't really come up. If you look from a cost perspective, because Indian market is not still a market that is going to pay a premium for environmentally friendly products. It's still, they want the economic cost of ownership, the total cost of ownership is what drives most purchase decisions in India. So if you look at electric vehicles, the total cost of ownership is pretty much become equal in two-wheelers now, but not so much in and almost there in three-wheelers, but not quite there, and still quite a far away as far as four-wheelers are concerned. And to be able to improve the cost of ownership in an electric vehicle, the more you use it, the better you are in trying to get to equal the petrol or diesel vehicles. If you're using it just for a small daily commute, you don't know how many years you're going to go before you are actually to pay back the additional costs. So I think until that TCO equation gets to be equivalent to petrol and diesel, it's going to be a hard sell to get Indian consumers to switch over.
Thank you so much, Devar. Thank you so much, Sri, for this opportunity and very informative, very good. Thank you, sir.
So now we have Mr. Yash. Yash, you can take the floor now.
Hi, Jay Garu. Thank you so much for your precious time. First of all, my deepest condolences to all the Indian soldiers who have lost their lives in Ladakh, China border. And also my support to all the farmers in Andhra Pradesh who've been protesting for the last 200 days. So, first of all, you're always an inspiration to all the youngsters like us, sir. And especially you come from a district where I represent, from Guntur, Tenali, and I think we know each other there. When we see you speaking loud and clear on the issues, you're always an inspiration to us in Parliament. And youngsters like us are always are inspired by you, especially people like us for NRIs. Whenever we see you and Ramohan Naidu Garu, so we would like to come back to India and definitely like to serve for the people of India. So today, my major questions would be on Indo-China relationship related questions, sir. And after all the soldiers' incidents, looks like India is very serious on China to teach them a lesson. That's what we're trying to see in major news channels and today's day to day. But right now, India have banned 59 applications of China applications. But I think that is a start towards teaching a lesson to China. But do you really think that will really help anything to China or India by banning 59 applications rather than having a lot of other applications or a lot of investments where indirectly China have funded many more companies like Swiggy or like PayPal or like Paytm and Zomato? There are a lot of number of companies where they're trying to fund Ola cabs and all that. So that kind of revenue is more than what we are targeting of the first 59 applications. So what is your take on that?
Well, what's been invested has been invested. I don't think anything short of actual war, we're not going to be able to get them to take that money out of the country unless they want to take it. So that's something that's already invested, and we have to live with it or we need to do something which is against all international law and norms to be able to get them to leave the country if we're not at war with them. So that's something we need to accept. Having said that, the knot is very big, and it's a big knot and a very tight knot. And if we have to untie that knot of China, dependence on China. As I was saying earlier, it requires political will to be able to make the necessary investments, either through the public sector or funding the private sector, to invest in long-term capability building and capacity building in strategic technology areas that currently India has no competence in. Electronics was on its way to becoming larger import bill than oil, until oil crashed recently. So if oil hadn't crashed, probably by the end of this year, the import bill for electronics would be even higher than oil for the first time. So we're on that path. When oil goes back up, even if it doesn't go up completely, if we still keep consuming electronics from China the way that we are now, that's going to continue to go up. So what are we doing about it? We don't have a single manufacturing facility that makes a silicon wafer in our country. So we talk about digital technology. We don't have the basic building block, not a single one in the country. We don't have anybody that can design. We don't have anybody that can do anything because we've not created that ecosystem that's required. So in these areas where we, even in pharma, we have some very good pharma companies, but we're still dependent on so much of the raw materials from China, right? I think 70–80% of some of the raw materials on some of the important drugs are imported from China. So, we have to study these supply chains, find out where we have dependencies in critical and strategic areas where we can't afford to have those dependencies. And we need to learn how to wean ourselves off of China and other sources and be prepared to, suffer a little bit in the process. The problem is public doesn't want to suffer even a little bit, and government doesn't want to do anything that makes the public suffer and doesn't vote for them. So these are things that they're big challenges. It's easy to, the solutions may sound easy, but implementing those challenges in our political environment can be quite difficult, and it requires somebody with conviction, somebody with mandate, and somebody who can carry the country along with them to be able to implement these things. So we're hoping that we'll see that someday.
Yeah, I hear you what you're trying to say. So as this is not a political forum, I would not like to talk more on the politics, but yeah. But when it comes, I like to put back the same question back to you, sir, because right now in India, majority of the youngsters and I mean entire world, especially America, Japan, and other countries like Canada is definitely looking at us, India, to produce, to manufacture the whatever China is doing today, we can manufacture that in India. So with a low cost than what China is doing, because we have a huge manpower in India, youngsters or low rated market people, right? So why Indian government is not taking a step towards talking about manufacturing entire small products in India and shipping it to other countries when the countries like America is already giving a leeway to us to do what we want to do.
So that ease of doing business is definitely what most companies would look for when they're trying to establish their manufacturing bases. I think if you look at the list of companies that left China in the last few months or have announced that they're leaving China, most of the companies have gone to Vietnam. And if you look at the COVID data at Vietnam, they haven't had a single death. And I think, I don't remember how many cases they have, but they haven't had a single death. And the disruption in their manufacturing and in their infrastructure has been minimal. So these are things that people look for, right? Even in India, if somebody's going to invest in India, they look for a state that's handling these type of crises better than other states. So if your state is doing better, you're more likely to get those investments. So I think, there's a number of things that India has to perform well on. And within that, we also have to remember that, the action happens, it's finally at the state government level. whatever the prime minister says or anything, he can bring them and then finally point them to some state. The state is the one that has to close the deal and help them in implementing the project and get the whole thing running. So if the state government is not progressive, then the central government can't do much either. So I think, you know, it's the states that have to get the job done finally, and different states have different levels of capability, as we are seeing.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, because recently the Microsoft has started in UP. So UP state have taken an initiative and they got that Microsoft 4,000 seated to India, which is a very great move by the state government of UP though. And 2014 to 2019, even your state have done a very fantastic job. Next question would go to majorly, why don't India concentrate on border security? Because India only realizes when there is an issue happening with China or India, or China or India between Pakistan, right? So what is that? What I mean to say is, we understand, as a citizen of India, I understand that India is good, border security is good in terms of manpower, or by air or by road. But do you really think that India is strong enough to fight with China on the ocean level and the sea level? Because I was just doing some research of our when we're thinking that the entire world is supporting India to go war with China at this point, but India is just stepping back. The reason to it is China got a lot good equipment via sea and ocean, because they have a good number of submarines to attack India if India gets into a war by ocean. So why don't India fund more on border security? Why always India remain silent, and it wakes up only when such kind of issues happens?
See, you have to look at the budget of the country and how it's apportioned. What percent is going to defense? What percent is going to health? What percent is going to education? What percent is going to infrastructure? And there's so many welfare schemes. You know, it's a huge number of things that need to get funded. And ultimately, you have what you have in terms of revenue to be able to fund all those things. So from that perspective, if you look at the percent of money, you know, the percent of our budget that we spend on defense and other things, I don't remember the numbers to be able to quote them to you, but I think we're fairly well in line in terms of the percent we're spending on defense. If anything, we should be spending less, not more, because we're spending more on the defense budget than, if I remember, health and education combined. So if we're not able to spend money on health and education, and we need to increase the defense budget, it has to come from somewhere, right? So I think it's a developing country problem. Developing countries should not aspire to be military powers. I mean, I think we're in a terrible situation where we have Pakistan on one side and China on the other, forcing us to spend what we are in a situation where we don't have money to spend. We don't have money to feed our people. You know, at times, and that's what we're seeing in the current situation. You know, we have to spend money on our health infrastructure. We have to spend money on our educational capabilities. We have to spend money on capability building, as we were talking about earlier. There's so many things that need to be done. And I don't think that spending more on defense can be the answer for India. We have to find other solutions. You know, if we're not able to stay out of alliances, maybe that it's time to get out of that wishful thinking of, you know, splendid non-alignment strategy, and tie up with people who we need to tie up with and get on with it. Because if we think that we can take on China, I think we're mistaken. It's a completely different weight class than we are in. And if we have to fight in that weight class, we are not going to be prepared for it, and it can easily escalate into a multi-front war with us, with Pakistan on the other side. And who's going to come to our rescue? We have to think about that. Is Donald Trump going to come to India's rescue? You know, he's going to cut a trade deal with Xi in the background, you know, to get what he wants out of it, and then he's going to ditch us. So he's not going to come to our rescue. So who will come to India's rescue if China and Pakistan gang up on us? And even if Pakistan doesn't gang up with China, if it becomes a full-fledged war, we cannot take them on. We cannot dream of becoming equal to them or to be able to deter them in any significant manner for decades to come. And that is if we commit today. So I think we need to wake up and understand what kind of world we live in and how we need to survive in that world.
Very, very amazing answer. I like that. So my last question would be, right, so again, point one, back to point first question. We understand that many of the people, many of the Indian citizens will not be happy if we try to ban the major suppliers like Zomato or PayPal or Paytm or Ola Cabs and all that. But at the end of the day, if you really look at our Indian population and Indian mindsets, right, 20 years back, we always used to find alternatives to what we used to get in India. But right now, people started being luxurious to life, and they wanted everything for cheaper rates. So that's the reason why they're trying to buy in Chinese, whatever the electronics and all that, right? So why can't India take little step and start putting a stop towards such kind of cheaper quality or such kind of major production, what is happening in China coming back to India? So why can't why can't India take a step to stop that? Even though the people might not be happy, but at the end of the day, 59 applications got banned. People were not happy, and they got used to it right now. And India started coming up with a new different applications like TikTok and all that. Indians started coming up with the new applications, right? Why can't Indian government take a step to do that? Is what my last question would be.
Yeah, I mean, in India, we follow something called IP more diligently than the Chinese do. I think we all know that.
Yeah.
So we can't necessarily, just infringe on IP rights the way that they do. Otherwise, we'd be another China, right? So we are not another China. We are India. And there's a reason why, in the long run, I feel we can still compete and possibly cross China, but that would require a lot of commitment and a lot of changes in terms of how we're doing things, which is certainly not out of the realm of possibility. I'm still hopeful and I'm still optimistic. But at the same time, I think, we have not required local content in many industries the way that the Chinese have. And I think with the recent changes that have been happening, we may see some of that going forward. I don't know how. I have to study, I guess, because it's just occurring to me. If China has been such an important member of the World Trade Organization and a champion of the WTO, how have they been able to have these restrictions and still be a member in good standing is something I need to understand. But, the local content rule is something that needs to be implemented in India, especially for things that, when we're buying huge amount of, when we're expanding our infrastructure in telecom, in highways, in every possible type of infrastructure, power and so on, renewable energy. What is the content of what we're putting into those industries? How much of that is being manufactured, produced, designed, in India is still too small. It's probably all the low-tech stuff, all the metal work, all the fabrication, all the civil work, all that stuff will be made in India. But all the technology is not made in India. None of the technology is made in India. So if you take the Indians in, working around the world, they could probably beat all of these companies together. If you took, look at the number of Indian scientists we have working in NASA, working in every major IT company in the United States, in every possible industry, in science, in technology, and research and development. Why is it that we're not able to produce one company in India that can compete at that level? It's really, we have a small electronics company in my group, and I've not been able to grow it because I don't have anybody that can design anything. And if I look for people in India, you can't find anybody because there's no company that designs anything. So which company do I hire from? You know, so you just don't have the capability because not because we're dumb and we don't know anything. It's because nobody invested in creating that ecosystem in India. So we are exporting all of our talent to all the countries around the world to work for companies that are making, you know, world-class products, but we can't have a single company doing it in India. So it requires capability building and long-term investments.
Very true. And my personal question to you, sir, because people like us, youngsters, people like us would definitely love to come back to India and try to be part of the Indian politics currently. But looking at the current diverse Indian corrupted politics, how do you encourage youngsters like us to come back to India and be part of the Indian politics?
Yeah, you know what? When I first moved from US to India, this was almost 30 years ago now. And I used to wonder how long it's going to take for India to become like USA. But now I'm wondering how long it's going to take USA to become like India. So whether it's politics or whether it's infrastructure or whether it's anything else, I think both are moving towards each other. It's not just that we're chasing America or chasing the developed world. Developed world also seems to be slipping in many respects, and we seem to be coming closer together. And you know, the politics don't seem to be very good anywhere, for that matter, right? I mean, look at the choices that you have in the upcoming presidential election in the US. You know, the leader of the free world, and those are the choices you have. So what kind of system produces that is being questioned, right? And I think even in India, what kind of choices do we have is what people are starting to ask. And, you know, when the choice is Modi or no one, or Modi or Rahul, you know, that means basically no choice, right? So I think, you know, countries around the world are starting to question their democratic processes to understand what kind of a system can produce these type of results. And if these are the kind of results we're going to be getting, I think the basic systems itself are going to be questioned. And I think we're getting closer and closer to that in every election cycle.
All right. Thank you so much, sir. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, Yash. And a couple of things I really liked about it. We are not in another China. We are India. And also, we are missing a leader like you here, Mr. Gala. You should be here, and we want you to be a senator or a great leader.
Thank you. Well, you know, I spent first half of my life in America, so I still love the United States, and I still consider it as much home as I do India. And I miss the US when I'm in India, and I miss India when I'm in the US.
We do the same, yeah. And we have reviewers asking few questions. Well, let's answer this, and we'll move on to our next panelist. The first one is, please explain responsibility of central government on the AP capital, that is Amravati now.
So it's a fuzzy area. It's not so black and white. It's a gray area. The right to determine the capital of the state is with the state. If the center doesn't want them to make that choice, there's a lot of things they can do to prevent them. So if it's not easy for a state to change the capital, if the center doesn't want them to, is not happy with the choice that they're making, there's a lot of things that can be done to make that not happen, other than even though the choice is not with the center. So while the choice is legally with the state, the center can play a significant role in ensuring that the state doesn't make a, I mean, good, bad is in any, you know, people can have different opinions, but if the center doesn't want them to make that choice, there are definitely ways for that to happen.
Thank you.
So in other words, if the Prime Minister doesn't want capital to be changed from Amravati, then it can be prevented from happening. But if it happens, that means that they didn't feel strongly enough to prevent it. Not that they don't have the legal power and they can hide behind that. But if somebody wants to prevent it, they can stop it from happening.
Thank you, sir. And we have one more question, that is, what is the future of India down to 4 years under Mr. Modi's rule?
Right now, I don't think it's about Mr. Modi or Mr. X or Y or Z. It's about Mr. Corona. What's going to happen with Mr. Corona is going to determine our future more than anything else. So I think we're living in a very different. It's not a normal times, and I think all governments are being, there's different people. I think the governments are going to perform the best. The economies are going to be performing the best are the ones that control the coronavirus over the next 2 years. Whoever doesn't control it those economies are going to lose a lot, and the countries that are able to control it and the states within those countries that are able to control it are going to gain significantly.
Yeah. And the next question is, when justice will be done for the Amaravati farmers?
Your guess is as good as mine. I'm also very much in the fight. Amaravati comes under Guntur Parliament constituency. Though I don't own a single cent of land in Amaravati, people accuse me of that when I'm fighting for it, but that's not true. I don't own anything there, but it's in my constituency. I was part of conceptualizing the city, part of planning the city, visualizing the city, working with the architects. I was very much part of that entire process, and Amaravati happens to be my grandmother's name as well. So I have a lot of emotional attachment for this project, and I really hope that better sense prevails, because this free capital idea is going to bankrupt our state. I mean, if the argument was that Amaravati is going to bankrupt us, even if you don't go with the grand plans of the Grand Amaravati, which would happen not through government investments, but through private investments over a period of time, everything we have that we need to run a capital is available in Amaravati already today. So duplicating some of that in Vizag, some of that in Kurnool, and having the need to have housing for these people who have to travel between 3 cities, and the TA and the DA between 3 cities, it's not a one-time loss to the state, but it's an ongoing loss to the state forever, as long as free capital idea is in operation. And I think it'd be a tragic path for the state to take. But ultimately, we have a constitution, we have courts, we are fighting in every forum, and I'm hopeful that we will succeed.
Thank you, sir. And now we have another panelist, Sridhar Appasani Garu. Sridhar Appasani Garu, go ahead with your question.
Okay, thank you. Jaydev Garu, first of all, let me congratulate you for the job you are doing, showing the dynamic leadership. It's not, you have proved that the number is not important, with just 3 members of parliament from your party representing in Lok Sabha, but it doesn't really matter when you and Mr. Rammohan Naidu and the dynamic leaders are like that. So you have established that leadership. So our hearty congratulations for that. You are a very young parliamentarian, a state as young as Andhra Pradesh. So I specifically want to ask you about the regional right now. So if you don't mind, I will ask in Telugu, because I want Telugu audience to connect with the questions and your answers, if you don't mind. ఇప్పుడు మన ప్యానలిస్టులోనే ఒక గ్రాడ్యుయేట్ ఉన్నారు, ఒక హై స్కూల్ గ్రాడ్యుయేట్ గోయింగ్ ఇన్ టు కాలేజ్. ఈ ఏజ్ కిడ్స్, ఈ జనరేషన్ కిడ్స్కి ఆంధ్రప్రదేశ్లో ఒక 15-year కిడ్ 10th class నుంచి బయటకు వస్తున్నా, లేదు ఒక 21-year-old coming out of a graduating college, engineering or any arts college. What is their future, and what are they expecting in Andhra Pradesh, and what do you see that they have opportunities within Andhra Pradesh, and when are they going to be hopeful?
So I think the world is changing. Even before coronavirus, the world was changing in many ways, and India may be lagging a little bit here or there, but not for long, and eventually will catch up and maybe even cross the pace of change that we're seeing in the rest of the world. So, it's I think the answer is not just about India, but you have to look at what's happening everywhere, and what is the nature of work, how is that changing, how are things being automated, how are jobs being taken out of the market because of automation, because of various technologies that are being introduced today. Sometimes it's staggering, right? But at the same time, if you think about it, at one time, before the advent of cars, there used to be a whole economy built around taking care of horses, right? Right from taking care of the horses to feeding them to putting their the blacksmiths and taking care of them when they're traveling. I mean, a lot of jobs were lost, huge number of jobs in those days, as a percentage also. When blacksmiths went out of business, every town, it was a major loss for them. So there have been different eras in history when the economy has significantly transformed itself to a different type of economy, different goods and services in demand, different ways of getting those goods and services to consumers. And I think we're on the cusp of that type of major transformation right now. So I think, when kids are going through school and trying to figure out what they want to do, they need to keep in mind that what they want to do may not be around by the time they come out of college, or maybe 5-10 years after they come out of college. So rather than focusing specifically on this is the job I want, or this is the company I want to work for, they need to be looking at creating long-term skills, problem solving, communication, creative thinking, various types of skills that will stand the test of time no matter what they're doing. And they need to understand that the era of career for a lifetime is over, and now it's a lifetime of careers, and they need to know how to pivot in their lifetime into several careers, because even our lifespan is growing now. We're even in my company, we were talking about it the other day. Our retirement age is 58, and I'm reaching that in a few years, and a lot of people are reaching that who joined 20-30 years ago are reaching that now. And we're talking about, well, if lifespans are growing, should we increase our retirement age? But finally we decided no, because at 58, if you're still working for a company, you probably lost the plot if you want to continue working for a company. You should be ready to go out and do something else with the knowledge and skills that you've gained in those years, to be able to add value to society in some other way. Whether it's public service or social service, or you want to become, get into art or music, or acting or whatever, something, not one career for a lifetime or with one company, but how do you keep building skills and capabilities to keep getting into your next career? I think that's what they need to be focusing on.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So my next question is, this is related to like investor confidence, especially in Andhra Pradesh, and which may reflect throughout the country, because if this trend continues, ఒక గవర్నమెంట్ ఒక ప్రాజెక్ట్ స్టార్ట్ చేసి ఇన్వెస్టర్స్ని ఇన్వైట్ చేస్తే అది క్యాపిటల్ సిటీ ప్లాన్ కానివ్వండి, ఏదైనా సబ్సిక్వెంట్ గవర్నమెంట్ వచ్చి వాటన్నిటిని నల్ అండ్ వాయిడ్ చేసేసి మళ్ళీ పాలసీలు మార్చేసి షిఫ్టింగ్ అని, లేకపోతే ఫార్మర్స్తో చేసుకున్న కాంట్రాక్ట్ బ్రీచ్ చేయటం కానీ, దిస్ is not just one related to today. This may be related to Andhra Pradesh and Amaravati farmers, but if this trend continues, is it not going to impact the investor confidence throughout India?
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. I brought this up in the last budget session of Parliament also, saying that this tarnishes the reputation of the entire country. It can also lead to lower credit rating for the country as a whole. Some of these things can even lead to that. So I think that the central government seems to be taking steps and ensuring that states are required to be bound by contracts. And I think that's a good move. And I was hoping that we'd see some movement in the monsoon session. I'm not sure what's happening with the monsoon session. Whether there's going to be a monsoon session or not is still not clear. So we're waiting to hear from the central government on this.
Okay, thank you.
But the brand of the state, the brand of the country certainly gets damaged whenever something like this happens.
Yeah, so that is what we all are concerned about. And next question I have is this is more of a political, because you are a politician, that is the fact. ఎస్పెషల్లీ ఈ అమరావతి ఉద్యమం గురించి అండి. ఉద్యమం ఇది 200 days నుంచి ఫార్మర్స్ ఫైట్ చేస్తున్నారు. దీన్ని ఎందుకు ఇప్పుడు అమరావతి జేఏసీ అయినా రైతుల పోరాటంగానే ఎందుకు చూస్తున్నారు? దట్ ఈస్ జస్ట్ ఇన్ మై పర్సనల్ ఒపీనియన్, రైతుల సమస్య ఈజ్ జస్ట్ వన్ ఆఫ్ ద ఇష్యూ ఇన్ దట్. అది ఓవరాల్ గా ఇప్పుడు ఒక క్యాపిటల్ సిటీ, ఒక ఇంటర్నేషనల్ స్టాండర్డ్ క్యాపిటల్ సిటీ, ఇండియాలో ఉన్న మిగిలిన మెట్రోస్ అన్నిటితో పోటీ పడగలిగే ఒక క్యాపిటల్ ఉండటం అనేది ఆంధ్రప్రదేశ్కి ఎప్పటికైనా నీడ్, అండ్ దట్ ఈజ్ వాట్ మేక్స్ అస్ ప్రౌడ్. ఆంధ్రుల ఆత్మగౌరవం ఎప్పుడైనా తలెత్తు తిరగాలి అంటే అలాంటి క్యాపిటల్ ఉండాలి. 13 districts పీపుల్కి అదే ఫీలింగ్ వచ్చి యునైట్ చేసేటట్టుగా మూమెంట్ ఉండాలి. కానీ ఇది రైతుల పోరాటం అంటే అదేదో పొలాలు ఇచ్చిన వాళ్ళ వరకే గవర్నమెంట్ వాళ్ళకి ఏదో కాంపెన్సేషన్ ఇస్తే అయిపోద్దేమో అనేటట్టుగా డైల్యూట్ అయిపోద్ది కదా. అదెందుకు ఆ ఫైట్ ఆ డైరెక్షన్ లో వెళ్ళలేదు? వైఆర్ ది జేఏసీ?
I understood the question.
Yeah.
Basically, it's difficult to make an assessment what people in Rayalaseema are thinking or in other coastal districts are thinking. The only way we'll know that is if there's an election. Otherwise, the polling has been terrible. Everybody who does the polls also, we don't know who to trust, who not to trust. Every time the ruling party gives a call for pro three capital idea, they gather all their people and show that there's enough people that support that idea. And whenever the opposition gets together and makes a call to support Amaravati, on that day throughout the state, their supporters will get together and show that yes, there's support for this idea also. But the only people fighting for it are the farmers in Amaravati. The people in the rest of the state, other than those who are politically affiliated or supporting those politicians on that day of protest, rest of them have decided not to take a stand. They don't want. I mean, even if they have one preference or the other, they're not ready to fight for it. They're thinking that whatever happens, how is it going to impact us? Even though they understand the long-term impact on the state, they're still having short-term thinking. And I think if only when there's an election, you'll see if they really think strongly enough that they don't want this to happen, that they won't vote for that party again, right? But if they do, then it means it doesn't matter to them. Not only doesn't matter to be able to motivate them to bring them into the street and fight, but then they show it doesn't matter even when they cast their vote. In the last election, the fact that this government would shift the capital or make this three capital idea was never discussed. It was never revealed. So there was no election for that decision. But in the next election, this will be something that people will have to vote on. And if they don't, it shows that the apathy runs deep. So we have to wait and see. As of now, it's only the Amaravati farmers who are ready to come out in the street and fight. Even people living in Guntur and Vijayawada are not ready to do it.
Yeah, that's the sad part. We should learn from Telangana people how they got Telangana state separated. The movement was all united, people united, and కనీసం దాన్ని చూసైనా ఒక స్ఫూర్తి పొంది ఆంధ్రప్రదేశ్ లో అట్లీస్ట్ ఈ క్యాపిటల్ కోసం ఇర్రెస్పెక్టివ్ ఆఫ్ ద పాలిటిక్స్ ఆర్ పొలిటికల్ స్టాండ్స్ ఆ ఫైట్ చేయాలని కోరిక. ఐ హోప్ ఫార్మర్స్ గెట్ ద జస్టిస్ డన్ ఫర్ దెమ్, బికాస్ ఆ పొలాలు ఇవ్వటం అంటే పెంచుకున్న పిల్లలను దత్తత ఇచ్చినట్టే. అది ఇచ్చి కూడా
the problem is that people in other regions and even neighboring towns are not feeling it's their fight. In spite of knowing that that it's a long-term impact, వాళ్ళకి అర్థం కావడం లేదు, లేకపోతే పట్టించుకోవడం లేదు, కరెక్ట్ అర్థం కావడం లేదు.
I hope people will change and people will realize one day. Otherwise, there is that is why I asked how within Andhra Pradesh, a 15-year, 20-year kids, what they can expect from their future. ఈ రోజుకైతే వాళ్ళకి
as far as their base is concerned, they believe every word coming out of their leader's mouth, just like in the US.
Yeah, that's one thing you mentioned. We always think here also like US is going backwards. We have seen these kind of divisive politics from our childhood, and now in US we are seeing, whenever we see this, we think like US politicians are learning from Indian politicians.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for your answers, and they're very heart touching and very honest answers. Thank you, sir. Nice talking.
Thank you, Sridhar Garu. And now we have Vishal Aditya. Vishal, are you ready?
Yes. Namaste, Mr. Gala. Thank you for taking up the time, especially given the time difference right now. My question is to do with the stress being faced by the government on their finances. The expenditures have increased recently and the revenue collections have been quite abysmal. So the traditional means of financing are also exhausted because of the 3.5% fiscal deficit, which has actually expanded quite a bit already. So with this background, my first question was going to be about probably the most affected in the whole corona crisis are the migrant workers. Now, the new scheme that has been launched only provides for some employment in the NRIGA scheme. Now, if we were to imagine that you are to take charge or you have a decision-making position here, what do you think are the feasible methods to alleviate some of their issues?
See, right now, the problem is that, when the fiscal stimulus package was first announced, it was announced that it was 10% of GDP. And if it was, that would have been great. But ultimately, it worked out, and it's actually worked. If you really read the fine print and go through everything, it's actually coming to more like 2% of GDP. So they need to pump in a lot more money into the economy than they're doing right now. A lot of what they counted into the 10% figure was a lot on the supply side and not on the creating demand side or putting money into people's hands. So I think if you look at the unemployment, the way that it's spiked, it's crazy. I mean, in India, I think it went from what was traditionally, I think 9 to 12%. It's gone to something like 40% unemployment right now. When you look at unemployment numbers, one thing you need to keep in mind in India is that they do not count the rural population who are involved in agriculture in the unemployment figures because they consider them as underemployed. So when you have 65 to 70% of the population living on agriculture, your unemployment figure is only applied to the balance of the people. So you're talking about the 30 to 35% of people who are not in agriculture. Now 40% are unemployed from an earlier base of about 9 to 12%. So that's a huge number of people who are out of work and have nothing to fall back on. And I think that's what needs to be addressed by giving employers support to pay salaries. Many companies, many small and medium scale industries are shutting down because they can't pay their labor. If you pay them money to pay their labor, then you're at least keeping some economic activity going. If you don't give that money to the SMEs, and that SMEs actually employ 80% of the workforce, only 20% are coming from the large industries. So if you don't support the SMEs, all those people are going to be out of work, and then you're going to end up having to send that money to them in some other form anyway to prevent them from starving. So rather than just giving the money directly to the person in their bank account, if you route it through the employer, you're at least keeping some economic activity going. So I would encourage the government, and if I was in a position to do it, I would be pumping in a lot of money into the SMEs.
Just a follow-up on that was, even before the COVID crisis actually struck India, there were a lot of macroeconomic troubles that were brewing up anyway. One of which was the twin balance sheet problem, where the banks were over leveraged, and we also saw the companies having trouble paying back their loans. And the second, what we had briefly alluded to, was on the job creation side, where employment was low, which led to consumer demand being low. So again, the push has been mostly through the supply side. Now, even without COVID, there were many issues. Do you think there has to be a comprehensive addressal of all of these issues beyond just the relief package right now? And if so, what steps do you think are necessary?
Yeah, this relief package is to keep people alive, and to keep that in mind. It's not just to keep the economy moving, but to keep people alive. I think that's the primary objective of this relief package. It's not to get into long-term structural weaknesses in our economy, which we talked about earlier a little bit when we talked about China. Those type of things are also very much required. But when will we be able to do that, and how will we be able to do that? Ultimately, we have limited resources and needs that far exceed our resources. So how do we prioritize? I think that's the skill that any government needs to show, is how to prioritize the spending of those resources that keep the most number of your people happy and elect you again. Because ultimately, every decision they make has that final filter to cross in terms of, will this hurt my re-election or will it help my re-election? So I think that's another challenge that we face in a democracy, which U.S. is also facing in its own way. I don't have an answer for you really, but it's possible. Is it probable? I don't know, because there's too much politics involved.
Okay, thank you so much.
So, Mr. Galla, of course, time is running out, but we have one or two questions remaining. Is that okay to go ahead and ask those questions for you?
Sure, two more questions will be fine.
Okay, thank you, sir. Sonika Uyuru, she's our last panelist. Sonika.
Hi, sir. Thank you for taking the time so far to answer all these questions. I really enjoyed listening to all of your very knowledgeable answers, and I learned a lot about politics in India, which I don't really know much about. So I just graduated high school here in America, and I'm going to go to college now, and I'm very interested in studying business and hopefully becoming an entrepreneur in some kind of innovative field. And I know you're a very big, prominent leader in the business industry in India. So I was wondering if you had any advice or insight that you can give to us aspiring entrepreneurs in America and in India, and your advice in that fact.
I think this is especially for entrepreneurs, this is probably one of the most exciting times to be, in the field, because as we've been talking about over the course of the evening, so many changes are taking place, which means that so many transformations are taking place, which means that there are so many opportunities opening up. People's behavior. In our company, we do what's called strategic planning, where we try to build a 5-year plan, 5-year strategic plan every year. So we relook at it every year, and it's not just adding a year, but looking at the whole 5-year plan and making significant changes if we feel we need to. So this year, when we looked at it, we had completed our 5-year plan, and we were just about to go for our budget approval when the COVID crisis hit. And suddenly our budgets didn't make any sense, right? So we said, we delayed our budget approval by a month. We went back to the drawing board, and we realized that our normal strategic planning process is completely irrelevant in the current situation. We need to do scenario planning, right? Where we're looking at possible different scenarios that could emerge, and how would we be prepared for each of those. And while we're doing that and looking at 4, 5, 6 scenarios that might emerge, and we're looking at what's called mega trends, right? Big trends like digitization is a trend, or various other trends that are happening. And we tried to look at this COVID, because of this COVID crisis, many of these trends are accelerating now, right? That means when the trends are accelerating, even people's behavior, it's because people's behavior is changing faster than normal, right? If you look at some of the products and services that are in demand during this COVID period, much more so than in the past, before the COVID period, where we thought, okay, maybe a decade from now, this might happen. But we're seeing that that's compressing and happening today, right? So when you're living through the biggest crisis the world has faced since World War II, that means your generation is coming out of college at a very significant time in history, a different era. We're moving into a different era. So what does that mean? What are the changes that's going to bring? And how can you lead those changes is what you should be thinking about.
Thank you very much, sir, for your insight.
Thank you.
For our final question, we have one viewer question, which your son will read out to you.
I'm sorry, I'm not able to make out.
ఓకే, నేను అడుగుతానండి ఫైనల్ క్వశ్చన్ ఒకటి. నాకు ఒక వ్యూవర్ నుంచి వచ్చి, ఎస్పెషల్లీ ఇప్పుడు లీడర్స్ మీద జరుగుతున్న అరెస్టులు ఉన్నాయి కదా, దాని గురించి చాలా కన్సర్న్ ఎక్స్ప్రెస్ అవుతుంది. ఎవరైతే ఫ్రంట్ లైన్లో ఉండి ఫైట్ చేస్తున్నారో వాళ్ళందరూ ఏదో ఒక రకంగా అరెస్ట్ అవుతున్నారు. సో వాట్ ఈస్ దిస్ ట్రెండ్? అంటే ఇది అసలు దీనికి ఎండ్ ఏంటి? వేర్ ఆర్ వీ హెడింగ్ టు? యాజ్ ఏ పొలిటీషియన్ అండ్ ఏ బిజినెస్ మ్యాన్, అది మీ దాకా వస్తుందని వర్రీ మీకు కూడా ఏమన్నా ఉందా?
See, I'm confident that I'm not going to get arrested for corruption. That much I can say. I've been arrested once already for fighting for the farmers in Amaravati. I may get arrested again for something like that. I don't know. But the fact that this government is indulging in vendetta politics and in coercive politics, vendetta is one side, coercion is another. If you don't do what we want, we will go after you, is coercion, right? So that's happening, unfortunately. I won't single out our state, but it's definitely happening more in our state. But it's happening at the central level. It's happening in many other states as well. And it's unfortunate that it's happening more in our state right now. It's very obvious. But I won't say that it's isolated. So that's one thing we need to keep in mind. It's a larger problem than only our state alone. And if we may not hear about it, but again, I don't want to keep trying to compare the US and India, but it's happening in US also, right? I mean, you can see what's happening with Trump and his cronies. How are they doing anything less than what our politicians in India are doing? So, not to make light of everything. I mean, I'm just saying, let's not assume that it's only happening here. But yes, it's happening here. It's happening to us. It's happening to me. It's happening to everyone. And the only thing we can hope for is that public will understand this for what it is. And I think that's starting to happen. And we can only hope that that gets exposed more and more.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for all the panelists. And ఈరోజు మేము let me end with a Telugu note because this is a lot of Telugu people are watching it. So ఈరోజు మేము బిజినెస్ సైడ్, అలాగే ఎకనామిక్ సైడ్, అలాగే హెల్త్ సైడ్ అండ్ యంగ్ ఆంటర్ప్రీనియర్స్ అండ్ డిఫరెంట్ సెక్టర్స్ ని కవర్ చేశాం సార్. అండ్ యువర్ knowledge is invaluable and really it helps a lot of us to understand and get in a prospect like how we can think different way now. And I wish you will be one of the best leader and we see you as PM too. That's what I think, as also the panelists too think about it, because a well-rounded person like you should be a PM for India. Hope and wish that happens soon. And any other suggestions or anything you would like to share with all the audience?
I think, I guess, most of the audience is in the US, is that right?
Yes.
It's all over the place, all over the world, sir. Everybody is watching, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, I would only say that the world is changing a lot. And it's time for everyone to really do a lot of introspection. You have time for that now also. A lot of reflection and introspection on what you want, what you need, and where can you get that? Because things are changing and industries are changing, countries are changing. So in a time of change, are you going to be the only one that doesn't change? Is something you need to be asking yourself. And if not, what are those changes you need to bring into your life to be able to move forward? I think if we can come out of this crisis with some of those answers, that would be a good achievement for us.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time. Thank you, everyone. And we are ending the session now. And stay safe and stay